As possible. You won't be just dealing with me anymore, but we have a great set of panelists, and I assure you that the cocktail hour will be kicked off as soon as we finish in here. So thank you again. I hope that you've had a wonderful day. We had a chock-full agenda of some stellar speakers and companies, and most importantly, learning about customer cases and the way that most organizations and enterprises are adopting cloud today. We also had a number of different sessions on DevOps and big data. So hopefully you got a chance to attend some of those sessions. We have 2 more days full of sessions as well, so we're very excited about that. But today I wanted to take a moment to sort of bring together everything that you've heard throughout the day and talk about the one common thread that I've heard throughout the day, which is the role of IT in this new cloud world, and the world of big data and of cloud and the Internet of Things. And as much as that sounds like buzzwords, the reality is that they're happening. The Internet of Things is happening. We have a ton of data, a ton of devices. Cloud is happening, obviously. And so what I really wanted to talk about today is, now that we have all of these new applications and workloads going into the cloud, how does the role of IT change? I'm going to get started by introducing our panelists, and feel free to introduce yourself.
All right, hi, I'm Dave Riak. I'm with Gigamon, and I come from the world of designing and building global networks and global data center footprints, as well as some very large global cloud infrastructures.
Hi, I'm Jeff Morris. I'm VP of Product Marketing at Good Data. We're an analytic platform as a service. So we end up talking quite a bit about moving analytics into the cloud or taking advantage of internet-based data sources that are driving the move to the cloud.
And my name is James Urquhart. I'm Director of Product for Dell Cloud Manager at Dell. We are a cloud management product for the consumption of IaaS cloud services. And we've been doing this for quite some time, and looking forward to this talk. It's a fun subject.
Always, and I think with our previous session around DevOps, it certainly ties right in. So we talked about a little bit about workloads and applications earlier in the day. Good Data does big data in the cloud. You're probably seeing a lot of organizations want to do analytics, but really don't want to make the investment in IT. What are some of the customers that you're working with trying to do, and how are you helping them to do?
Well, that's exactly the case. They start out wanting to gain the efficiencies of not having to manage things. They want to. They're usually capturing information that's already living in the cloud. We're seeing a little bit of reticence still of the move of a lot of on-premise systems into the cloud, but the predominance of a cloud-based data source like Salesforce, like Marketo or Google Analytics or any of the social information networks, those are all creating opportunities for analytics to happen in the cloud. So the types of customers that we're seeing is technology-based vendors who need to present their own analytics to their customers. That's about half our business are those types of organizations. And then the other half is indeed these types of businesses that are performing these customer-based analytics about their own customers, but the data sources are already living in the cloud.
Okay, and you mentioned that you're building out services in data centers. So what is sort of your customers seeing?
Yeah, so our customers are dealing with pretty much in the world of the evolving IT platform and infrastructure, everything being wrapped up with this term called cloud. They're still having to face the traditional challenges involved in a scalable, highly available, fault-tolerant underlying infrastructure where the network speeds and feeds are increasing dramatically from 100 and 1 gig to 100 meg and 1 gig to 10, 40, and 100 gigabit links. They're dealing with virtualization, where getting data to analyze out of the cloud is becoming an even bigger challenge, because not only are the workloads now virtualized, but the network traffic, the user behavior patterns between users and servers and applications are also being virtualized with overlay networks, software-defined networking, and those things. So Those are the big challenges that we're helping our customers solve, is maintaining visibility as workloads move to the cloud, where that move introduces risks to their control, risks to their governance, and risks to seeing the data that's going with the workloads.
Mm-hmm. James, I know that you've spent a great deal of time and not only taking a look at how IT evolves in the workloads and applications, but also really trying to help companies understand what needs to happen in their organizations. What are some of the things that you've seen throughout the last few years evolve within IT organizations?
I think there are a couple of really interesting things that are that I think are key trends that define the space. So first is the shift from an infrastructure-centric perspective to an application-centric perspective. So the easiest way to kind of describe this is, IT quite rightly evolved from this thing of making sure there were systems available on which to run software first, and then helping to run the software on those systems. And that had to be. There were no options out there. I mean, service bureaus tried and failed. There were some other things that were done, but for the most part, co-location and other things. But for the most part, IT was responsible ultimately for making sure that there was a system in place to run. The cloud is a little bit different. What the cloud developers are discovering about the cloud is they can come to the cloud with a set of bits, and they can say, I'm looking for a service or a set of services that will take this set of bits and turn it into an application for my business, whatever it may be, or for myself. And so that shift means that instead of looking at things like CPU utilization and memory utilization and even to a certain extent CPU architectures and things like that, what they're looking at is they're saying, I have code, or I have data, or I have config, or I have policy, and I need to find the things that will turn that into the appropriate kind of need for my business. I may have to write more code to do it, or I may be able to find a service out there that I just have to configure some things, add my data to it, and now that's my sales application, or that's my whatever. So that's one big area, is that shift to an application focus. So that means that now everything is being described in terms of applications, right? You're getting descriptions about services and APIs utilization, a lot more measurement in terms of user counts and transactions and so on. So those are the things that I think, that's one big area that I think. And the other big area that I look at then is, the architectural approach we've taken in the past works really well for a single deployment module, right? So design very clearly, this is the structure that I'm going to deliver, this is the way that it operates. But the problem you run into is with the internet and with the networking that he was talking about earlier, when you have 50 or 100, or with your friends on the internet, 1,000 different applications interconnected in different ways and data sets interconnected in different ways, all in a very dynamic world that's constantly changing and never predictable, architecture doesn't work at that scale. Okay, architecture works great at the component scale. It doesn't work at the system scale. And you need to be more of an ecologist. So I don't say the enterprise architect is slowly going to turn into the enterprise ecologist, because you've got to measure and study the system. You've got to let the system tell you what it is, and then you've got to do the work that you need to make changes. So those are the two big areas that I see that I think are really, really important to understand in the transformation of what IT is being asked to do.
So all of these transformations in the industry, cloud, software-defined networking, big data, didn't make IT go away.
Not at all.
Absolutely not. What James is talking about is, we've called it in the recent past service-oriented architecture, and there's no doubt. I mean, one of my passions is automation and orchestration, right? And that's top of mind right now in the IT architects, or I love your calling them ecologists now, because that is a great term to refer to this system, because the IT organizations have to deliver a service. No longer are the business stakeholders who are funding IT interested in the latest CPU technology that the CIO's team chose to deploy their servers on. They want to know what their customers are doing, why their customers didn't buy a product when they visited their website and left and went somewhere else. They want to know exactly why it's taking 15 seconds for you to swipe your card at the local department store versus the accepted SLA of less than 2 seconds for the approval to come across. And those aren't based on CPUs. They're based on the system and the data analytics. And again, going back to it all continues to ride on an underlying architecture. But even the hardware manufacturers are no longer looking at, they continue to look at the component level, but they're understanding more about, why they need to bring innovation in the hardware for the top layer services that their buyers are building their infrastructures for, whether they're in their own data centers or in the cloud providers, right?
Right.
Well, but don't you guys also seem to see that there's a growing, let's call it impatience. So on the one hand, it's gaining efficiencies, but it's user or line of business impatience with the entirety of the exercise of maintaining and building and managing and worrying about the architecture itself. The ecology I like a lot as well, but it's the users themselves. Your overall user communities are driving your new levels of service and your new demands on the ecology. So even your ability to wait everything out is much more difficult.
I'm not saying IT is doing a good job of handling these new demands that are being placed on them. Don't misinterpret what I say at all. No, and I think this is what's really hard, because the skill set that my experience comes from infrastructure automation. In part, and in software development. But the most powerful in sort of any mid to large size IT organization, the most powerful organization in the 90s and the 2000s were the VP of Ops and the data center guys, right? The amount of money spent on data centers and equipment for data centers way outweighed everything else that was going on. So the huge amount of the skill set that these organizations have are built around the delivery of infrastructure. So part of turning this ship is, in part, people, these organizations coming to the realization that there's a skill set that they need to pick up and adapt. But at the same time, there's just an organic shift that has to happen as well. And one of the things that I think, I'll put a little prediction out there. I don't know if it'll come true or not, but it seems like it's logical to me. Is one of the things that will happen is some of these business units are going off and doing quote-unquote rogue IT, become increasingly successful at driving revenue into the business. At some point in time, the CEO goes, well, that's my IT department. You guys are, operations for managing my legacy, but these are the guys that are building out the value for my organization right now. And if that's, those kinds of, I hate to be the purveyor of messiness, but that's what these, organic changes are. That's what these systemic changes are. They're messy by nature. Some things survive, some things don't. I'm not saying people are going to lose their jobs. Please don't take that the wrong way. What I am saying is that people are going to be finding themselves learning new skills, new capabilities, taking their heads and putting them in different places in terms of how the full stack of software and hardware work, because that's what the demand is going to, your point, that's what the demand is going to ask for. I don't think IT's there yet. I mean, I can tell you someone trying to sell a product that directly addresses that problem to central IT, that there's a lot of organizations out there that have a long way to go. Oh, yeah. But they'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I was going to compound those new IT organizations that are defining and adopting cloud-based applications and whatnot. One of the banes of all our existence still is we're perpetuating a really, really age-old information problem of the information silos everywhere in different departments. And cloud just makes that worse, because the kinds of applications that are out there that these the different departmental organizations are adopting are indeed, they're adopting a more efficient, less expensive silo for whatever the thing they're trying to automate. And the worst part of it is, I think as you mentioned earlier as well, these systems aren't accessible by JDBC or the traditional means. They're all driven by API. So the role of IT ends up becoming much more of a data integrator, an API connoisseur, and someone who understands all the business systems and starts to worry about how to weave them together.
And a system operator too, in the sense, a service operator. I used the wrong term there. A service operator as well. So, they can deliver the things that have the APIs, right? That's the other thing that IT can do really well. But again, that's a software operations job, not an infrastructure operations.
But in fact, in today's IT, it should be an IT role.
Yeah,
It should,
it
absolutely.
should be.
And APIs is something that you've never really heard in an IT operations role.
Yeah,
Job descriptions I've never seen. Make sure you know how to
I know
use
of one
APIs.
company. I know of one company in the world that
Who is
I've seen,
it?
which is Bechtel, right?
Okay,
So
absolutely.
they've done a full project where they have an API layer. They have a team of people that maintain that API layer across
Yes.
all of their data, back-end construction data.
Well,
and it's been incredibly
Very
valuable.
true.
Yeah. It used to be called the IT R&D department, and what they were doing was building applications for their business. But that's exactly what has led to this huge growth in east-west traffic and huge pipes to support east-west traffic boundaries. Because the IT R&D guys were building these large monolithic binary applications, and then the device got smaller, and access to the data, the user wanted it faster, and the quality of service went down because users were distributed and the applications were residing in silos of IT, and there wasn't quick access to the data. And that's where the software architecture went to the distributed application environment and APIs, all the way from just large binary apps talking to each other in smaller form, to SOAP, to XML, to REST, JSON, and everything that we have today. And that's actually what the applications look like now. They're little bits of apps, or applets, and they're transacting across networks and across servers. And that's where all that east-west data has come from, and it's now virtualized. But it's all about the IT, becoming the service operator. And then one other comment and validation point for you, James, is that if you're a small to mid-size enterprise, you might be consuming cloud services left and right. If your Salesforce doing one thing, your marketing using cloud-based solutions like Marketo, whatever the case might be. But the fact is that you have global multi-billion-dollar financial services institutions who are taking lock, stock, and barrel their global public internet properties and the marketing department moving those properties to the cloud with no involvement of IT. And that's an exaggeration to make the point, right? But they're taking it out of the hands of IT and adopting the cloud model for efficiencies and better time to deliver the service they want.
And certainly something that we see happen more and more, right? It may be an exaggeration, but we do see that happening more and more. So what does this mean, right? So good data, your buyer is probably not IT.
It's a little of both. Our buyers are indeed line of business,
Okay.
but then and most recently we're spending significantly more time with IT, teaching them about not only with the makings up of the entire environment. The odd punchline being that once I tell you how much big data technology is in here, you don't need to know it anymore, or worry about it anymore. And I probably shouldn't have even told you in the first place. It's those kind of conversations are happening now. But it does seem that we're definitely seeing that we have to have IT involved in our type of purchase. But that's kind of the nature of business intelligence anyway. Is it's constantly changing. It's got to be more agile all the time, and that oftentimes creates opportunities for IT to be involved, so that the governance exercises are indeed true, and and user expectations on the other side are being met.
It's Simon Wardley, who's a researcher at CSC and who's done some brilliant work on innovation using cloud and IT as sort of an example of it. He points out that there's a spectrum of activities within the IT organization. And so it's a mistake to say, not that you said it, but it's a mistake to say that, everything's shifting to this new kind of innovative, high rapid model. Everything has to be done in that way. So understand also that there are systems that you have that won't change very often. There's a reason why mainframes are still a massive part of Fortune 500 company portfolios, because the algorithms that run on them haven't changed significantly and fundamentally in many, many years. In those situations, then, the model is one that does fit, more into a traditional traditional IT model. There's more traditional governance to be put into it, a little bit tighter and stricter controls. What's happening now is the cost of failure has crashed through the floor with cloud, right? So you can try something now and just see if it works. And if it doesn't work, you're out a few tens of thousands of dollars, worst case scenario, right? Where it would have been millions to even try before. That change means now there's this whole long tail of stuff that was untouchable financially that is now available. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing, it's not that the dollar amount of value of these things is going to be significantly higher than the legacy stuff that needs to be maintained. Yeah. It's that the amount of it, because it's long tail kind of stuff, is so huge, and the amount of activity it generates is so much that you have to be built around processes around being able to handle not knowing, being able to handle change, response to situations, automation to make sure that the high-scale situations are taken care of. You have to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to do that long tail, and the guys that do are going to find that magic formula before you do.
So I know that you spoke a little bit about overlays and underlays, and that's something that in infrastructure, the network is probably the last area to evolve, right? And we're seeing software-defined networking and networking virtualization. Everything to do with the network administrator is something that is undergoing a transformation. What are some of the skill sets that you would say have to be different today for that network admin or that IT person who is managing a network today and are looking to deploy something like network virtualization?
Yeah, so in the world of network virtualization, we're not necessarily talking about virtual servers or virtualized server OSs. We are talking about how those virtual servers do communicate across physical, geographic, and even local network boundaries. And the packets are getting virtualized, and the network administrator is having a bit, in my opinion, and I know that there are those out there who have caught on, grasped it, and digested it, and are flying high in the world of virtualization. But with the major move to virtualization being driven by the server team and by VMware, if you look at what they're using today, is a bunch of that networking is being moved into the server administration team. So the skills that really need to be just gone out and devoured by the network administrators are the things around network encapsulation, the things like all of the network vendors have them: Cisco Fabric Path, HP, VXLAN in the world of virtual switching, VNTag, and all of the above. And remember that it all started with VLANs, and MPLS was one of our first overlay networking technologies, if you really digest it. So taking those skills that they have in the networking field that they've been practicing for a couple of decades now, and then biting off the up-and-coming technologies, especially, I am a big open source fan, and I love everything that open source has done for commercial off-the-shelf software. But the fact is that we have to look at the 80% plus dominant market share holder being VMware and what they're doing in the software-defined data center and in their switching platforms, whether it be their new NSX or even the VXLAN technology. Cisco's new ACI platform, their recent acquisition a little over a year ago, is also all based on VXLAN. So being able to look into that traffic with current tools and extract out of the real-time traffic flows the actual native IP data is really important to those real-time data analytics pieces. And it can actually optimize some of the historical data analytic capabilities as well. So capturing those, I mentioned several buzzwords, right? And those were the keys to focus on for the network admins.
The key thing there is you're bringing in virtualization, which means you're bringing in a server administrator who is probably now making decisions around the network. And the network has always been isolated in its own little kingdom. And all of a sudden you have server, storage, networking. As you start to move up the applications, and everything else that comes along with, the IT organization, you start to come together.
Yeah.
And those are really the skill sets that need to evolve.
Yeah, and I will say, though, that there's also a higher layer, the layer 8 skill set. And I'll tell you, so we're a technology vendor, and the best meetings that we have with our customers are when the mid to higher layer IT management representative is in the meeting, and the network architect and network delivery engineer and the VM server administration team, whether they're doing KVM or Citrix Zen or VMware, okay, that is, more of those meetings have got to take place in order for the IT organization to evolve to the next level and to really create that service-oriented architecture platform and become a service provider to their stakeholders. Those meetings, if you're not having them now, do it, because it's only going to help you make it to the next round.
And I know that in cloud we saw it even more so, not only at the infrastructure layer, but now also moving into automation and orchestration. James, how do you think that changed the way that IT looked at overall infrastructure?
Well, I think that's still in progress. But I think one thing that's very true is what is much more accepted now than it was, say, 5 or 7 years ago is the concept that you could fully automate a release cycle for a piece of software and it would be okay. So we've just moved to a weekly release cycle for our SaaS environment. We cut our on-premises software once a quarter from that same code base. And it's incredibly automated, and we're working hard every day to automate every new piece we can figure out how to automate. And we're a product company, so it's a little bit understandable about that. But what we're actually beginning to see now is, things like, a large construction equipment company who is, has this incredible service that backs up their heavy equipment that they sell, where they're starting to talk about the fact that they can do releases on a daily basis, right, and update that system as they see fit. For service-based, that's one of the powerful things of becoming a service provider as an IT organization and looking at services you could offer both your customers and internally is this whole upgrade cycle problem. It's different. It doesn't go away, but it's different, and it's different in a good way. You reduce a lot of the stress in terms of dealing with updates. If you custom own the code and you can deliver at whatever pace you want to, if you are using different pieces and parts, you can react to changes in the different vendors in a much more agile way, and your customers don't have to go through a process of downloading and installing to make things work. That alone should be enough to perk your ears up and go, oh, well, maybe we should look a little deeper into this because we're sick and tired of reinstalling SAP every couple of years, right? I mean, I'm dead serious about it. That alone ought to be a reason to say, let's reevaluate all of our packaged software with the idea how much money we would save just on operations.
Yeah, just on upgrading alone. Yeah, well, as practitioners of that exercise, right, we're on a daily release cycle, especially for just the infrastructure kinds of things that we've got to keep watch over. Right? Like all of the OpenSSL issues, et cetera, that were out last month or last quarter. But it's a complete change. Is that release cadence is very beneficial to the customer, especially when it's transparent to them. Right? That transparency is fantastic. They just new features at the user interface level. If they bubble up that high, they just kind of appear. Or at least you can gain a tutorial on them to learn about them, and it's very unobtrusive for the organization.
So you mentioned that your buyer is primarily line of business, but you're also starting to educate IT much more, because at the end of the day, you have to bring it together, whether it's the organization doing it themselves or the vendor educating their customer. What are some of the pain points you see in that education?
Well, the exercise is really pointing out and and ratifying the internal workings and architecture of the system so that we gain the confidence of being able to handle big data style loads of warehousing data. So talking about having HDFS baked into the system as the staging layer and proving that out and saying, you know, there's opportunities whenever you have weird unstructured data, we can dismantle it and then put it into things like Vertica and then put it into our downstream data marts. That whole exercise of first walking the customer through the entirety of the process of handling information in the cloud is sort of step one, and gaining their confidence there. But then it's also demonstrating, as practitioners, that we actually know how to be operating each one of these big data technologies, and that much of the exercise is to gain the trust of the of the customer and the confidence that we jointly own your problem with you, right? So when a data load fails, it's a situation where it says reflects as badly on me as it does on on the load or on the customer that it happened to, and that's much of the challenge is gaining that trust and that reassurance that we really do care and need to own the problem with you.
I think integration. A lot of what you talked about was around various aspects of integration, integrating with the business.
Yep, absolutely.
What brings it all together is integration. None of these applications we're building, we call them silos, but they're not silos from an operational perspective. They almost always integrate with something. There's almost always a data layer integration, or there's an integration in terms of it's even to a certain extent being loaded into an OS on a mobile device. But there's code level integrations. There's the protocols of sending various things around. This is one of the big problems that the systems thinking thing starts to come into line with, because what happens when you have all these components that you don't control the architecture of anymore, they're dynamically appearing and disappearing and changing and upgrading on different paces, is you have to begin to manage the relationships between things explicitly as well. So you have to begin to now know, well, what are all the things and what are all the different relationships between the things? And that's where IT will come into play in every single application that goes out there, whether the developer likes it or not, is ultimately, well, somebody's got to be sitting there looking at, measuring and understanding the big picture, and then understanding how to control the relationships. And one example of that I'll give you is, let's say you have a feedback loop that you start discovering that's kind of negative to the system, right? So you're seeing a lot of traffic and a storm of activity, or you're seeing some data getting updated that triggers another update, that comes back and triggers a bad update again on the original system, some sort of thing along those lines. The traditional architecture way to think about it is you go look for the root cause and you fix the root cause. But with a lot of these systems things, the root cause is a trigger that came in from the outside that triggered the loop to happen. You can't really do it that way. So what you have to do is look at the relationships between the things and insert a new agent, at least temporarily, into that feedback loop relationship that breaks the feedback loop. So something like there's a book called Release It, and there's a pattern in there called the circuit breaker, where you can sort of put it in a half open state where you actually redirect traffic, or you do activities a different way while you figure out what the heck's going on, and then you either fully shut down or fully throw an error or redirect traffic completely permanently, or there's some activity you take that completely changes things, or you go back to normal when you figure out what's going on. But you could put something like that into the network traffic or into one of the application endpoints within that loop. And if you have the capability and the skill and the infrastructure and the software infrastructure to do that, like Netflix has done with their Netflix OSS stuff and other things, then you have a powerful tool to begin to look at the system without having to go to each developer at 2 in the morning and go, hey, dude, guess what? We found 3 lines of code that you have to change right now, or else the system will never come back up and be alive again. And those are critical. Again, that's a critical skill set. That's integration now is as important as functionality, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And not necessarily in just one role, right? It's across the IT organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has to be understood.
Right, exactly. I think it's a brilliant point, right? So it goes vertically throughout the stack, as well as horizontally across all the things that are talking to each other within IT as well. Yep. And
that is a big shift, right? As simple as it sounds when you talk about this way, in vertical and horizontally, that's fundamentally a new way of thinking. Also, a new way of thinking that you mentioned earlier is really thinking about IT as a service. Right? And so today, we don't necessarily look at it that way. IT, for the most part, has always been a cost center, right? And when you take a look at some of the more forward-thinking, like Bechtel enterprises, who are creating centers of excellence and really trying to strive for excellence for their business users, that is really thinking along the lines of IT as a service. How do you make that evolution for someone who has been in networking or has been in operations in general? Do you want to?
Yeah, well, that evolution is interesting because I think you mentioned, James, that IT used to kind of be the center of power and control. And it used to be acceptable to the business units that something in IT wasn't working, and whatever we were depending on them for, or IT for, had to be put on hold until IT could produce what they needed to do. But now, with the crave for instant information, instant analytics, instant ability to make business decisions, that is no longer an option, is it? I think everybody in here would agree that the business units are now driving and demanding that IT produce and IT demonstrate the value to the business unit. Otherwise, things are going to change. The business is going to go outside of IT to solve the problems. Seeing that evolution, and another huge thing is the rate of change. And you guys have both alliterated that beautifully, that it's the rate of change that has gone, hockey stick up in the last 3 years across the mid to large enterprise space in IT, that if you think you're okay and comfortable siloed with your area of expertise, you've got to wake up and see that this rate of change is going to demand that every individual in the IT organization needs to add another skill, understand, at least starting with the understanding of the bigger picture. I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, you can't depend on on the IT punch list, right? Of project by project of things I'm going to get to. No. And to James's point, you can't depend on the end users to give you something that you anticipate to be moving into the ecosystem. They could bring anything in, right? In the old days, all we were worrying about was the rogue use of Excel. But now it's it could be everything, and so the IT person's flexibility in their ability to understand that relationship, understand how the integration points are going to be, not only initially but evolving over time. Those are the kinds of, that flexibility, I think, is one of the bigger changes that at least mentally you have to adopt.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll let you. Just really quick, and like I said, some of those old activities are still necessary. So don't throw away all those systems and say, okay, we're starting afresh. Because that's not the point. The point is that there's this new class that has to be dealt with. It's probably going to be a big part of the activity that you have to deal with on a regular basis. And so you need to get good at understanding that spectrum of behavior and how to deal with the different aspects for different things, applying different skills, different tools to different aspects of what you need to do. The good news is the new tools all integrate really well. So generally they have APIs and other things. So it's not an impossible task.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, to put it in perspective, the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world, which are fairly unique case studies to point at, but their rate of change is 200 releases a day on production. Okay, and that's, to me, in a global enterprise manufacturing company, that's kind of insanity, but that's life. And the fact is that the web scale IT capabilities that they have developed are coming into the enterprise. And that's where I think all this talk is going, is that the enterprise is now having to adapt and change at an increasing rate, just like those types of properties are doing today. And then my final point before I let you guys chime in is that the other thing that's happening is that there is a certain break point in the cost model of cloud solutions. What I mean by that is you can take an organization, a very large organization that's purchasing, in the $10 million range of cloud service platform annually, and they are going to hit the point where they realize that my cost of mitigating regulatory issues, mitigating security and privacy issues in the cloud is higher than if I just bring it all back in and do it myself. And I want you to know that there are companies doing that right now. So it's kind of my warning to the big names out there, with 3 letters mostly, but there are others, that there was a recent huge drop in the platform costs, right?
4 letters, right?
You're 4. But that 3-letter company dropped the bottom in the pricing and thought they'd win the market. Well, guess what? It's not true. So that price point is still there, where there's a certain point where the enterprise, especially the large space, is realizing that they can do it less expensive by using all the things that we've talked about around service automation, being a service-oriented IT department, building our own private clouds and leveraging what we can out of the public space.
I think the tax code in Brazil is changing at the same rate. It really is. It's about 200 changes a day is what
Yeah.
I think my panelists are trying to tell me that they need a drink now. So.
We are standing.
Let's talk about how the drinking habits are in the future.
Web scale drinks out front.
One last point, and I'm going to give you some time to think about it, and also the audience. Is it called IT anymore? Is it information technology? Is it information services? Is it services management? Is it cloud management? This is something that I've been thinking about and would be very interested in hearing what you think.
I have a simple answer, yes. I'll take the easy way out. Just say yes.
It's not really IT anymore. I think we call it IT because that's all we know.
Well, it depends how you define technology, and that can get into a whole big thing of fun. But if you include software technology, then it's still information technology, but it's just different technology and different skills. I think. But your point about information services or IT services, information technology services, or just technology services. All those are legitimate names for I think what better represents the shift, where it went from being primarily technologists in the sense of keeping the technology alive, and it's become much more about providing a service that helps the business learn how to use information technology and successfully use information technology in the scope of the company as a whole to do either new things or existing things better or whatever it may be. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a slow shift, but I do see evidence that the power of the data center operator is beginning to wane in a number of organizations.
I was going to take the analytic way out and say, well, yes, of course it's still information technology. It's just now you have time to worry about the information that goes through your business and that actually people are making decisions upon, rather than all of the underpinnings underneath it.
Instead of being information technology, it's information technology, right?
Okay, well, I will leave it on that note. And are there any questions? We have a couple of more minutes for. Okay, let's take some.
I just have a simple question. So, what you are talking about, let's say for a system admin who has been working with, let's say, bare bones technology, server technology, networking, Cisco, Microsoft, and somebody who is kind of keep going on the, Hyper-Vs or the VMware because that's where cloud is going to. What other skill sets would you recommend so that his job does not become obsolete?
You might want to repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is around what kind of skill sets for the administrator who's kind of been working in all of the above spaces, sort of, between networking, servers, and different virtualization platforms. I think it is a little bit. I think that my recommendation for you is to definitely look at the ones that are here, and I was looking for a couple to be here that are not. But those purveyors of the orchestration and overall management tools that are heterogeneous, that will manage your orchestration for VMware and Xen and KVM, and the OpenStacks of the world that are also commercialized. So OpenStack, for information, is an orchestration platform built on open source. that can manage from bare metal iron in the case of servers and uninstalled server iron and network switches and routers, all the way to managing the applications on the platforms, to the commercial versions of those platforms, and those that James has represented, and also look for those that are introducing the price modeling of the solutions you're using, which are also on the market today.
Yeah, I'm going to answer. I'm going to add on one word. It's statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would.
That was the question I wanted to ask you about. Given this abject and very, very poor track record of IT, it sounds like what we've done now is we've said, okay, that's the problem. We know who the people are. They did it wrong. But we can do things differently. But we need different kinds of people. But they're going to do more or less the same thing. I mean, all the problems that you described, I basically see a lot of them getting solved in a public cloud. I'm very skeptical that all this technology and stuff that you're describing can actually be built in a data center. That's trying to understand how to reconcile that, how to provide IT with a bridge from where they are now to where you described them needing to be.
Well,
maybe we take that offline and we go for drinks.
Yeah, but just really quickly, Vanessa, if it's okay, is that I think we both referenced the fact that that those web scale capabilities in the public space have evolved, and there are fantastic solutions off the shelf today to help the IT organization specifically bridge that gap. And it's not called what just came out of my mouth. It's called the platform orchestration software from XYZ company. And I don't want to name names because there's a bunch out there and I don't want to leave anybody out. But I think that there are great tools that are designed, I think from the innovator's perspective, designed to make it easier and automated. But I think the actual ancillary benefit is that they are going to help the IT organization make the transition that I think we've been talking about.
If you haven't seen the panel before us, right? So Randy Bias, I think, gave a phenomenal answer. He said, look, you've got everything from build it yourself like Netflix did, all the way up to I want just a catalog where I just pick components like Drupal or whatever out. And then you've got a bunch of stuff in between. And it's not either or. It's all very complementary to each other. And I think the transition, again, comes down to what services do you end up offering. And some of that services could be run in the data center. And really the data center problem becomes not how do I implement all those technologies so that the CEO knows I implemented those technologies. Yeah. It's how do I correctly implement those in support of something that gets consumed ultimately by the business in a successful way. And that's why, I do what I do, he does what he does, right? It's because there is that new layer of service to be had out there.
It's statistics.
Well said.
Thank you so much.